I just like to check this out every now and then. If you're here for the first time, would you just raise your hand for us? Here for the first time. Anybody here for the first time? Right over here. Let's give them a welcome tonight. We want to welcome you here. Let's go into some of the prophecy and talk about some of the categories we have, like in the news and for New World Order. This came out today. Syria war has killed more than 350,000 people in 7 years. 7 years of conflict in Syria have left more than 350,000 people dead, according to updated overall death toll released Monday by the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights. We know that the Britain-based monitoring group, which relies on an extensive network of sources on the ground across Syria, said 354,000 people have been killed since March 15th of 2011. It talks about this: the conflict, which will enter its 8th year on Thursday, this Thursday, today, is taking a devastating toll on civilians, including the ongoing regime assault on the rebel enclave of eastern Ghouta near Damascus, where over 1,000 people have been reported killed in the last 2 weeks alone. According to the head of the observatory, 104,000 civilians have been killed in 7 years. We know that's 20,000 children and 12,500 women. The rest, of course, are made up of the Kurds and the other tribes that are fighting Bashar al-Assad, and Christians. So there is a genocide going on in there of massive proportions. So along with that, this is another article that came out. Haley warns if the Security Council doesn't act in Syria, U.S. will. U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations Nikki Haley warned on Monday that if the UN Security Council fails to act on Syria, she got that report about the dead, Washington remains prepared to act if we must, just as it did last year when it bombed the Syrian government airbase over a deadly chemical weapons attack. It is not the path we prefer, but it's a path we have demonstrated we will take, and we are prepared to take it again, Haley told the 15-member Security Council. When the international community consistently fails to act, there are times when states are compelled to take their own action. So basically what she's saying is we're not going to sit by and see this genocide. We're not going to see Bashar al-Assad continue to butcher his people in the name of his regime. And so obviously that's implications for Russia. It's implications for Hezbollah. It's implications for everyone that's backing up and pushing up and prompting up Bashar al-Assad's regime. Let me give you a little bit more. Facebook is in trouble. They may have violated FTC privacy deals, says former federal officials, triggering a risk of massive fines. And I'm not going to read you all of this, but I'm going to tell you a little bit about it. There was a group of Facebook sharing of data with Cambridge Analytica. It raised serious questions about about compliance with the FTC consent decree. So how many of you have Facebook? Just raise your hand. It's okay. So it means this: you probably have been compromised. That means that they have shared your information, your profile page. They share the things you like, and so they're sharing that. They're not supposed to do that without your consent. It's against the FTC laws and rules, and it's against your privacy and all the laws that are for your privacy and Privacy Act. And so they've been found out by doing it, and of course it's become politicized. We now know that they're talking about the Trump administration using it to find out about voters, but that's really not the issue. The real issue is that this Cambridge Analytica was allowed to get all this information, and Facebook gave it to them. So Facebook are the ones that are really responsible. The fines are $40,000 for each one that's done, which means there's 50 million people that this has done it. So 50 million people is probably all of us at Facebook have been compromised, which means the fines could range into the trillions of dollars, and it would put Facebook out of business. So I want you to understand that that they're probably not going to get all of those fines. They have summoned Mark Zuckerberg, excuse me. It's a tough name. Mark Zuckerberg to Washington to testify for the Congress, and I'm not sure what he's going to do, but I'm sure there'll be some fines. I think they should start renaming Facebook to Factbook, like your facts, sharing with everyone, or maybe Fatebook, because we're not really sure what the fate of them are going to be. Let me give you another one. Britain four meals away from anarchy if cyber attack takes out power grid. This is from DEFCON warning system. British cities would be uninhabited within days, and the country is only a few meals away from anarchy if the national grid was taken down in a cyber attack or a solar storm disaster, and security experts have warned. So we know that the grid systems in most of the developed nations are antiquated. The grid systems, the electronic grid systems in America are extremely old, they're fragile. We also know that's the same in most of Europe. And so Russia, the reason this comes out is Russia is now starting to talk about some type of repayment to Britain for blaming Putin for the gas attack to a former KGB agent, a double agent. It's the first time they've used gas since the World War II, and they've used it on a civilian population. The week before he was gassed and his daughter, there was another double agent, Russian agent in England, that was strangled to death. And so it has been known that Putin has said things like this. He will never tolerate a double agent. And no matter where they go, they're not safe. He's already been on record saying that years ago. As head of the KGB himself, obviously he's looking to do this vendetta. And so now he's saying that he had nothing to do with it. He actually said that from the beginning. But he's making overtures that he has power to take away the grid systems in America and in England through cyber attacks. Supposedly, it's very, very plausibly can do that. But you don't have to do just that. You can do an EMP, explode a device above the atmosphere, and it'll wipe out the grid system. So we know that we're very vulnerable, and we know that if he's going to come back anyway, it's going to be like that. What will happen? Well, the experts are saying that Britain is only 4 meals away, 4 meals from anarchy, which means they'll eat those 4 meals that are in their house, because that's what the average Briton has in his house, 4 meals. And then, of course, the lights would be out. You'd be thrown back to the Dark Ages, the 1800s. And then anarchy would take place as people scavenge for food. And so that's a pretty scary scenario when you think about it. America only has, I've given you this a long time ago, the average American only has 3 days of food in their pantry. So it's something that really kind of gets very, very close to home when you think about it. And in light of the storms that came through Birmingham, or not Birmingham, but northern Alabama, it doesn't take much for us to understand that those scenarios can happen. So people ask me all the time about prepping. I think if you have a room that's the size of this room and it's full of food, you're not smart. I think you're just wasting your time. I think if you have some food that's put aside, that's good for any emergency. Somebody say amen. So there is a compromise and a balance that is there, and I think we need to use it. Let me give you a little bit more about the New World Order. So I've been telling you about AI, artificial intelligence, and I talked to you about, and I gave messages all over the country, as a matter of fact, about AI and the Revelation connection, about Antichrist. Still getting comments coming back from YouTube and Facebook on those teachings. So let me tell you the newest one that's come out. You ready for it? This is the article. AI is actually hallucinating. A new report at Wired magazine is raising the specter of a large problem and a huge problem that has appeared in artificial intelligence programs and projects. It hallucinates. The system, according to the report, can see things that aren't there. That could be a big problem for products dependent on machine learning, particularly for vision, such as self-driving cars. And we know that Uber even now is pulling off its self-driving cars because of a fatality that happened not too long ago, this last week. And so this AI, this artificial intelligence, here's what it's doing. They are not sentient. The word sentient means you're sentient and I am. We can formulate thoughts, we can have imaginations, we use our brains that way. Robots can't do that. Robots can only access information that's there. But what's happening now is we're watching robots access the cloud and information from all over the world. So what they're doing is they have a super intelligence on almost every level you can imagine. And so now they're starting to take things to the next step. It's not a sentient thought. They're not going to ever have that right now. They're not going to have that. But they are doing this. They're using their algorithms to figure out things that are not programmed to figure out. For example, if a robot, a simple robot, not one like Hanson's robots like Sophia, if a simple robot that's on a machine shop, say, that it's just taking apart, putting it from here to here, starts to be able to do that with its software, and it has the capacity to access the cloud like Sophia does, it can actually take that part and not put it in that machine, and not put it in that automobile if it was, and take it someplace else. So that is pretty scary. Somebody say that's scary. It is, because basically they're able to do whatever they want to do, and just by accessing the information that's there. But because the information is so sophisticated, because algorithms have come so far, and because we have taken this technology to almost the brink of where it's going to go, we're going to start seeing things like that happens. Now think of this. All drones are AIs. How many know that? So if you have drones in the air that are used militarily, which is usually where it's going, then obviously their parameters broaden not by what they're programmed for, but if they're hallucinating, they can do anything they want. They can go into a town, and instead of taking out an enemy, they can take out civilians. So that's the scary part of this. I want you to understand that, because you're going to continue to hear more about that as we get further and further along. Putin believes that cyber warfare and drone warfare is the warfare of the future. Let me tell you something about Putin. He's absolutely right. That is a paradigm shift. And so he's absolutely right. Something is going to happen, and the ones who are going to control the world really are going to be the ones that are going to control cyber warfare and control any AIs. Let me give you a little bit about Israel, what's happening there. This is a picture that just came out from Israel. Whenever Israel bombs someplace that's an enemy, they usually don't say anything about it. But think about the logic on this one and understand why they didn't do it. Israel has admitted It was behind an airstrike that destroyed a Syrian nuclear reactor. That's a Syrian nuclear reactor, the target before, that's the target after. Now listen how long ago they did it. Ending a decade of silence over the attack in September 2007. They did this in 2007. They never claimed any responsibility for it, and they took out this nuclear reactor. Now obviously that's a sign of aggression. If you go into another country and you take F-16s and you bomb some building in there, obviously the world's going to get after you. Why didn't the world go after Israel? Watch. Military censors lifted a 10-year-old order of secrecy on the mission, Reuters reported, revealing that the Israeli F-15s and F-16s warplanes targeted the Al-Kubar facility near the city of Deir ez-Zor in the east of the country of Syria. It said the reactor was an emerging existential threat to Syria and the entire region. Remember, it's 2007. The Israeli Defense Forces, that's the IDF, are releasing newly declassified video footage of the attack that did it this week, by the way. It was known as Operation Orchard, as well as photographs and intelligence documents detailing the bombing and the planning of the mission, which used almost 20 tons of munitions. Israel claimed that the reactor was being built with the help of North Korea. You want to know how North Korea fits into end times? They're going to fuel and they're going to help all these countries that are going to go against Israel. And was only months away from activation, which means if it's a nuclear plant, they're able to have nuclear weapons in it. It kept the strikes a secret to avoid Syrian retaliation and possibly escalation into a regional war. So why didn't Syria retaliate? Anybody have any idea why? Because they were denying they had any nuclear sites. And so Israel caught them. They understood that they're not going to say that they have a nuclear site, so as long as they're not going to say it, we're going to take it out. So how many of you think that's absolutely brilliant? So Israel officials then, once they found out, they had inside pictures of this, which means the Mossad, which is their CIA, had infiltrated this building as Syrians. And they took pictures of the entire inside, so they knew it was an operating nuclear reactor, very close to operating. And so they asked the CIA in the United States, with their concerns about the CIA, were asked to analyze the site. Although they agreed that Syria was likely building a nuclear reactor, U.S. officials were hesitant to carry out an airstrike, as they were not convinced that the Al-Kubar facility was capable of producing nuclear weapons. So, as such, Israel decided to proceed alone. I love the fact that Israel doesn't wait for anybody to tell them what to do. I just love that fact. A video of the strike shows several bombs hitting the facility. Warplanes then make a second pass and bomb the rubble to ensure that the complete destruction. The whole operation took 4 hours. They bombed this place for 4 hours. On the night between September 5th and 6th of 2007, Israeli Air Force fighter jets successfully struck and destroyed a Syrian nuclear reactor in development. An IDF statesman said today the reactor was close to being completed. But listen to the rest of this and listen to the logic. The announcement will be seen as a warning to Iran, which was conducting its own nuclear program until it agreed to halt development in exchange for the lifting of international sanctions in 2015 with Barack Obama. However, President Donald Trump and Iranian leaders have questioned whether the deal can be maintained. If it collapses, Iran will likely restart its nuclear project. The motivation of our enemies has grown in recent years, but so too the might of the IDF, Israeli Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman said on Wednesday. Everyone in the Middle East would do well to internalize this equation, he said, suggesting a substantial threat to Israel in the region in the form of a nuclear reactor was being built in Syria. The Deir ez-Zor region was captured and held by several years by the Islamic State militant groups. So you know what he's saying? He's saying, had we not taken it out in 2007, ISIS would have had control of nuclear weapons. So Israel thwarted a massive nuclear problem. Because how many of you know ISIS would have used them? They controlled the area. So there's a lot of things that are happening that have happened that we just go right by. But I'm telling you, I can see God's hand all over that. Somebody say amen. Let me give you a little bit more. This is also in Israel. This guy is Muhammad Abbas. He's a Palestinian state like Iraq, Saudi Arabia, and other Islamic countries will not have or allow a single Jew to live there. That's a quote from him. So Abbas came on the scene, and I'm not going to read you all this. It's like 4 pages. Abbas came on the scene, and he was like a moderate when he came on the scene. He was wooing the West, and he was telling the West that he wants to make a democracy out of the Palestinian state. So he's pushing the West to be able to broker a deal to have a two-state solution. But he is a liar. He's a big liar. He's lied all the way down through his presidency, and right now, a lot of the polls in Palestine are saying that in the Gaza Strip are saying they want him out. He's done nothing. Now we know that he says many things, even in front of the UN. The truth is, Abbas was never a moderate. He never recognized as the leader of the Palestinians. He was never willing or able to reach a peace agreement with Israel. Today, polls show that Palestinians want Abbas to resign. He's failed to achieve anything to improve the lives of his people. Little publicity is given to the fact that he has been so unpopular. He can hardly travel around Israel. 40% of the people that are under his rule live in Gaza, and he has not gone out of Ramallah since he's been the president. He's afraid he's going to get assassinated. His people hate him. His PhD, he had a PhD thesis, by the way. It was questioning the veracity of the Holocaust, whether it was accurate or not. That was his PhD thesis, and comparing Zionism to Nazism, and it was overlooked as youthful indiscretions. More recently, however, the magazine noted he's accused Israeli rabbis of supporting the poisoning of Palestinian water wells. He calls it a blood libel, claimed the Jews have fabricated history, and insisted he would never recognize the Jewishness of the state of Israel. He needs to go like yesterday. Abbas is also a proven liar, and he told some whoppers in his February speech before the UN Security Council. He claimed, for example, that the creation of Israel produced 6 million Palestinian refugees who live in exile. The actual amount of people it produced back in 1948 was 65,000. And so 6 million, 65,000 is a long stretch. Abbas also repeated the counter that the Palestinians are descendants of the Canaanites. The Palestinians are not descendants of the Canaanites. Talk about history. The Palestinians are Arabs, are aboriginals of Arabia. The Canaanites, there's no Canaanite living today. Not one single Canaanite. Palestinians are aboriginals of Arabia. Abbas' statement should have had the delegates laughing in the aisles. He says our national institutions in Palestine or Gaza are recognized by international organizations for their merit and work. There's not one single institution in the Gaza Strip or Palestine that's recognized by anybody in the world, which is based on the rule of law, accountability, and transparency. You believe that one? And empowerment of women and youth in an environment of tolerance, coexistence of civilizations, and non-discrimination. But he pays Palestinian terrorists to kill Israelis, and he pays them to do that. So I don't know how that's non-discrimination. Maybe we're using the wrong words here. Equally comical was his claim to pursue peace. He insisted Israel's intransience has caused the failure of all peace initiatives dating back to Camp David. It was Yasser Arafat, however, who turned down statehood at Camp David, and Abbas, who rejected Ehud Olmert's two-state solution. He's already rejected that. And Abbas, who has refused to negotiate with Israel's prime minister for the last 8 years. What they didn't tell you is this. He was also the number 3 man in the PLO before he was ever a terrorist organization, before he was ever prime minister. Let me give you a little bit more about Israel and tell you this one. Israel, the third temple calendar launches this Saturday on New Year of Kings. I'm going to do something. Some of you, Andy has gotten some of his coins in. How many of you else got coins in, temple coins? And so I'm going to pass these out. We're hoping that they'll get back to his hands by the end of the night. Cheryl, if you're back there, would you collect them? And so I'm going to pass these out. These are the temple coins that the Temple Institute is making. And again, another firestorm happened all over the internet when I said this. People don't want to support a demonic temple. That temple is only going to be temporarily used by the Antichrist. No one really understands, but that temple will be expanded in Ezekiel. That's the millennial temple that the Lord will build, the Bible says. And but so it's going to be expanded from the spot where this temple is going to be built. So listen to this. This month shall mark for you the beginning of the months. It shall be the first of the month of the year for you. Exodus 12:2. I was sharing this last night, and Andy, wave your hand at us. Andy is a Christian Jew. He celebrates the Jewish festivals and the calendar as a Christian. And so when I was talking about the first of the year being a certain month, I saw his eyes go like this because he knows where the first of the year is. It's not the month I'm telling you about. So listen to it real closely. This Saturday will be the first day of the Hebrew month of Nisan, which according to a Bible is the first day of the year. The fact is only noted on the King's calendar, a new calendar specifically designed for use in the Third Temple. So they're saying this Saturday is the first of the year. Andy, when is the first of the year according to Jewish tradition? Rosh Hashanah, which is in September or October. So it's contrary, and his eyebrows went up. And I think he understood it once we got through the whole thing. We all did. But listen what it says. The calendar was created by Reuven Prager, a tailor who makes biblically styled clothes in Jerusalem. Prager is a Levite and takes his biblical identity seriously, using his skills as a tailor to create the banner of the tribe of Levi. He's also created the priestly garments, by the way. Prager based the design on the description of the banner in the Midrash Rabbah, an ancient collection of homiletic teachings. For 20 years, Prager has minted silver half-shekel coins, not these, a biblical donation that was used for temple expenses. As part of his passion for the temple, Prager decided to dedicate 36 years ago that he wanted to create a calendar for the Third Temple. And you'll understand what this means and the significance in a moment. But the project was so complicated and required so much research research that the first calendar is only coming out right now. It's a mind-blowing calendar for the Third Temple era, Prager told Breaking Israeli News. It's the first of its kind and will be followed by calendar makers in future generations. The calendar is aesthetically pleasing, beautifully printed with images relevant to each month. But the calendar may not make sense at first to those unfamiliar with the biblical system of dates. A Gregorian calendar goes from January to December. You and I are on a Gregorian calendar. It is the most messed up calendar you could possibly imagine. Basically, the Catholic Church and the popes got involved with it. Pope Gregory, that's why it's called the Gregorian calendar, and they wanted to rectify the fact that that quarter day was not being taken, 365 and a quarter days, and so he eliminated one whole month. There was a year way back when you went from December 1st straight to January 1st, and so if you had a birthday in between December 1st and January 1st, I'm not sure what I can tell you. You missed it. So the Gregorian calendar is off because it's a solar calendar. It's based on the sun. The Jews believe in a lunar calendar, much more accurate, by the way, based on the phases of the moon. So a Gregorian calendar goes from January to December. A Hebrew calendar, lunar, usually begins in Tishri, the 7th month of the Bible, which generally falls around September, and ends in the month Elul. The king's calendar begins in Nisan, referred to the Bible as the first month since it is the month the children of Israel's exodus from Egypt. Now, what are they trying to say? There is a Jewish calendar, and it conflicts with this calendar because this calendar is not talking about the historic Jewish calendar. It's talking about the first month that God said you should make the beginning of your year when the Israelites came out of Egypt. So he's using it as a temple calendar. Now, why would he use it as a temple calendar? Because he wants to plot the dates where sacrifices come, where the different festivals come. This is really getting us very, very close to temple sacrifice, because he's saying on this day of this calendar, this is what you need to sacrifice in the temple. On this day, this is what you need to do for the temple. Let me give you an example. The first month of the year, Nisan, is particularly packed. The Korban Pesach, the Paschal offering, is supposed to be performed on the 14th of the month, along with the fast of the firstborn, which is still observed today on the day before Passover. The calendar also notes that the barley for the Omer offering is reaped on the evening of the last night of Passover. The king's calendar tracks all activities that took place in the first and second temples, which will be performed again in the third temple when it's built. This includes the biblical feasts that are observed today, 7 major ones, but the calendar also has many surprises, holidays, and events that are only observed when a temple stands in Jerusalem, the whole reason why this calendar. The first day of the month, Sivan, the third month in the king's calendar, is noted for trumpet halishka, the bringing of the silver half shekel to the temple. The 15th of Av, the 5th month in the temple calendar, is noted for being the last day of cutting wood for the temple, because the temple is fired by wood. And so it says this, and 2 weeks later, the first day of Elul marks the new year for the tithes of the cattle. Since this calendar is intended for the third temple, not all of the holidays are biblical in origin. The holiday pertaining to the modern state of Israel, such as Yom Hamatzmat, Israel's Independence Day, and Yom HaZikaron, Memorial Day, appear on the calendar, as does Jerusalem Day. So in any case, the calendar marks the first time since AD 70 that temple events and sacrifices are given specific days to be performed in the rebuilt temple. Pretty interesting when you think about it. Let me give you this next one that's coming out. Well, actually, I'm going to throw that one away because it's part of the other one. So let's talk about war and talk about what's happening here. Anybody know what that is? Besides those who were in my Wednesday night study last night? That is a submarine, but it is a drone. It is a captainless submarine, and it's not from the United States, which usually has the technology on all this. This is from China. China is building a fleet of giant drones for the sea. China is in the process of building a fleet of giant drones for the sea, Forbes reports. According to Forbes, China is working on creating remote-controlled ghost ships that would send containers around the world and even work for the Chinese Navy. Right now, China ranks for the third largest marine shipping company in the world, and some predictions expect it may become the world's #1 marine shipping company by 2025. According to a World Maritime Report, China began building a huge test field for autonomous ships of the South China Seas, coast of Guangdong Province. The test field in question is 771 square kilometers, is set to become the world's largest field over the next 3 to 5 years, and will become a testing ground for technology that allows a captainless ship to steer and avoid obstacles. With this in mind, and China's growing reach in the Pacific region continues to irk the U.S. and its Western allies, Australia's decision to send a British warship into the South China Seas might start to make a lot more sense now. So what's happening is China is controlling the South Pacific Seas, now in the South China Seas. If you know anything about World War II, you'll remember that we had Japan controlling all those little islands and controlling Burma and Indonesia. Indonesia was originally occupied by the British, and so the British fought them until the Allies came in. So we had a hopscotch in the World War II. We had a hopscotch over those islands to get to the mainland, and of course we never got there because of the atom bomb. But basically, they control that whole area. That whole area right now was controlled by the Allies, by America. It used to be controlled by them because of World War II. We have lost that area. That area now is all controlled by China. China is taking in that vacuum. We have pulled our troops back, so obviously after World War II, we have pulled them back, and so China is now occupying those areas. China is unparalleled in what it's doing. It's building its own islands there. It has a NORAD station that's 6 floors underneath the bottom of the ocean, and so it's preparing for something. And I've told you this before, maybe it's a hard name for you to remember, so I'll tell you again. It's called the Thucydides effect. Thucydides was a Greek. I'm going to keep telling you this so you understand it. This is history. If you ever heard somebody say history repeats itself, have you ever heard that? It does. And let me tell you what Thucydides said. He lived when Athens was the king of the world, and the Greek state Athens, and Sparta was a fledgling underneath it, the city-state of Sparta. But Athens got lazy, and as Athens got lazy, Sparta started to rise. And so the number one ruler of the world at that time, Athens, was compromised because of Sparta, and a war broke out. Thucydides says this will always happen when you have a number one power. When you have a number one power and they lax in their vigilance. How many of you know what's the most supreme nation in the world? What is it? The United States. But we've laxed in our vigilance. We've taken money away from our military. We've not thought about threats. We've allowed people in Europe to do whatever they wanted to do. And basically, we're watching 2 nations now rise up in the Thucydides effect. The Thucydides effect has happened 15 times in mankind's history. Rome was another example. Happened 15 times in mankind's history, and every single one of those times except one, those nations that rose up conquered that number one nation. So we're watching Russia and we're watching China build and flex its muscles right now. So America is in a spot where sooner or later they are going to be challenged. There are fears that China will use aforementioned capitalist vehicles to patrol the maritime areas under and beyond its control. So they're going to go all over the world with these things. And by the way, they're not going to lose any manpower by doing it. You take one of them out, there'll be other ones that are there. Let me give you a little bit more on war. This is the European Union flag, and that's a symbol of the Trojan horse. Turkey promotes Islamicized Europe through demographic jihad. I won't read you all this, but Erdogan is making statements. He's been making it for 15 years. He wants Europe to become a Muslim country, or excuse me, a Muslim domain. And he says things like this. This is a member of the ruling Justice Development Party under him. His name is Alparslan Kavalogu. And the head of the Parliamentary Security and Intelligence Commission recently stated, the fortune and wealth of the world is moving from west to east. This is the Thucydides effect. I'm telling you, it happens. Europe is going through a time that is out of the ordinary. Its population is declining and aging. It has a very old population, so people coming from outside get the jobs there, and that's true. Europe has an aging population, and basically they're dying. But Europe has this problem. All of the newcomers that are coming into Europe are Muslim. From Morocco, Tunisia, Algeria, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Iraq, Iran, Syria, and Turkey. Those who come from these places are Muslim, and is now such a level that the most popular name in Brussels, Belgium, is Mohammed. The second most popular name is Mali, which is also Islamic. And the third one is Aisha, which is also Islamic. According to him, the trend continues. The Muslim population will outnumber the Christian population in Europe. This has increased the nationalistic, xenophobic, and anti-Islamic rhetoric there. Hence, marginal small parties have started to get larger numbers of votes, but there's no remedy for it. Europe will be Muslim. We will be effective there. Allah willing, I am sure of that. And so let me tell you the way they do it, 2 ways. It's called jihad. There is a demographic jihad, which means, and I'm not going to quote it to you, but they say over and over again, Erdogan, the Prime Minister of Turkey, as well as other Islamic leaders are saying to their Islamic women, and I have the quotes here, have children, have many children. First came out, the one quote says, has 3 children. That was about 4 years ago. Now Erdogan is urging every woman in Turkey, Muslim woman in Turkey, to have 5 children. What they're doing is they're trying to overpopulate Europe. If it's not the war jihad, it's going to be a demographic jihad. So the truth is, it is coming, and it's coming to Europe. And let me tell you something, as Europe goes, America goes. All you got to do is wait about 5 to 10 years and America will be that way. So we're watching this happen, and I'm telling you, it's a satanic horde. Not every Islamic person is evil. I'm not saying that. But the premise of Islam is evil. It's a lie, and it's evil. Muhammad was not God's messenger. And let me tell you something, I'm going to get a bunch of mail, probably a lot of hate mail from this. But Jesus is the Son of God. You cannot tell me he's not the Son of God. I don't care how much you write it on the top of domes. Jesus is the Son of God. And so we're watching it happen, though. This is the enemy trying to push against the church, and he's been doing it for a long time. Speaking of that, let me give you a little bit about religion. You still with me tonight? Nigeria's Christians today, Europe's Christians tomorrow. It's an interesting article. It says usually Africa only breaks through to the West when Western targets are attacked by terrorists. First, the two U.S. Black Hawk helicopters were shot down in Somalia in 1993. Then Al-Qaeda attacked U.S. embassies in Kenya and Tanzania in 1998. Then only a few days ago, Islamic State published a video purporting to show an ambush in Niger in which the 4 U.S. soldiers were killed last October. And what does the West do? Absolutely nothing. We are extremely silent. Let me tell you what's happening in Niger. This will go on to tell you this. Niger, they are killing Christians in mass. It is one of the largest extermination of Christians, genocide, that we've ever seen. And the numbers are absolutely astronomical. The African Taliban are going after them, killing everybody, every Christian in villages, every man, every woman, every child. We know that Boko Haram is doing it, and we're doing absolutely nothing about it. I told my class last night, if you pray tonight, pray for your brothers and sisters that are in Nigeria. They're going through one of the hardest persecutions ever on that nation. And let me tell you why I think it's happening. Africa used to be the nation that was lighting up with the gospel. We were sending missionaries there all the time, and Africa was an amazing Christian nation. I've been there many times on missionary journeys in Uganda, and I've been in Tanzania, and I've been in Kinshasa, Zaire. But they've been rising up. But now, since colonialism is being thrown out, which probably should have been, we're watching Islam start to infiltrate Africa. As it infiltrates Africa, it's killing Christians. It's not trying to give them the opportunity to flee. They're killing them. Last year alone, they destroyed 2,000 churches in Nigeria alone. So we're watching it happen. 16,000 Christians have been murdered in Nigeria since 2016. 16,000. 7,950 victims of police custody. Police are Muslim. And so they're killing Christians. As soon as they get them in, they're killing them. Nigerian Catholic Bishop Hyacinth Egbo warned if the Islamists should overrun Nigeria, it will be a stepping stone to conquer smaller countries. The domino effect, like we had in Vietnam. If Nigeria falls to Islamic extremists, all of Africa will be at risk. The West truly needs to care about the daily carnage suffered by the poor black Christian and abandoned population. And indeed, we need to. Now, I'm not berating anyone. We go all over the world doing missionary work, and I'm okay with that. But if you're going to do some missionary work, find out where you're going and to whom. And let me tell you something, there's not a whole lot of missionaries going into areas that they'll kill you as soon as you land off from the plane. And so we're watching something. I even know that the gates of hell will not prevail against the Church of Christ. It's not going to happen. You try to stamp it out, and those Christians are going to get so strong in Nigeria. Tell you what, if I ever have somebody wanting to pray for me, I want somebody that came from Nigeria to pray for me. Because these Christians are going to learn, they're going to learn through the fire of how to trust God. And I'm not crazy about that, trust me, at all. But God's going to honor them. Somebody say amen. All right, let me give you a little bit more moral decay. Some people tell me that I talk really fast. It's because there's so much news. I got to get it all in. Here you go. You ready for this one? The womb for rent. Washington State in America legalizes commercial surrogacy. Previously, the law only permitted women to be reimbursed for medical and other expenses associated with surrogacy. Listen to all this article. The amendment, in effect, legalizes commercial surrogacy, so women can now rent out their wombs in Washington State. Sponsors of the bill insist that the goal of the legislation is to reduce the suffering of infertile couples, but its real-world result would be to further commodify human life and exploit desperate women. So here's my question. I asked it last night, because I shared this last night. I said, where are all these women libbers? Where's the NOW organization that wants to back women? This means that women are for sale. It means that they're going to make commodity out of them. What it means is this: women who can't afford to live, who have no finances, are going to start selling their wombs so that they can have money coming in, and they're going to be baby machines. What about exploiting women? Where's the liberal now? I'll tell you where the liberal left is now. The liberal left does not care about women. It may say it does. It cares about their vote. It has nothing to do with them. They are not standing up. They're not saying anything. If I was a liberal and I was part of a women's movement, I'd be the first one to say, hey, we better go to Washington and protest. But no, they'll spend their time in front of the White House doing something that has nothing to do with women's suffering. How many are with me? I got to watch it because I got excited last night. I almost preached on this. So I'm not going to. because I'll get really ticked off, and I don't want to do that. Let me go on. Give you a little. How many of you just see the inconsistency that's there? It's extremely inconsistent. Let me give you a little bit about the planet and what's happening there. Two things. Number one, a great thing's happening tonight. There's going to be a massive solar flares tonight, and that's the great news. The bad news is you're not going to see them. They're northern. They're coming from a sunspot that is emitting gamma rays, and that sunspot is a solar storm. Now, let's just link it together a little bit. These solar storms, this is a small one, but it's lighting up the north. If you've ever seen the aurora borealis, some of you have ever seen it. Unbelievable. It's breathtaking. Living in the north, I was able to see it a couple times in my life. It is absolutely breathtaking. Well, it's going to be much, much more so, because as the sun emits this from its corona, what's going to happen, it sends out a gamma rays all through space, and it hits the Earth's atmosphere. As it hits the northern atmosphere, these lights up, the northern lights light up. And this is better than any picture you could ever see. The thing is that we've been talking, and let's link it. If one of these flares, this one's not going to damage us. If one of these flares is a little stronger, we got to move satellites out of the way when these flares come. They're magnetic. They'll shut down satellites. They'll shut down your cell phones. So if they're very big, X5s, and there have been some, and they're pointed towards the Earth, they got to be pointing towards the Earth. Many of them are, not all of them. And it could wipe out our electronic grids. How many of you understand what we're talking about? Just like an EMP. So this one's not a threat to us. It's going to be an amazing sight. A large solar storm is capable of wiping out entire electrical grids on very large areas, and they have to move satellites. So that's happening. Let me give you one last one. This one has to do with prophecy, and it has to do with earthquakes. I've preached this, and I've taught this, and I've showed you the statistics, but I think this article came out and was very, very good. I want to combine prophecy with science. Most people don't do it. Earthquakes and the end times. When Jesus was asked what would signal his return to the end of the age, he said to look for a number of signs. You know these. One of those signs was the appearance of earthquakes, Matthew 24:7. But what does that mean? Well, after all, earthquakes have been part of the human life since Adam and Eve. They are not rare. When Jesus said look for signs, he talked about the earthquakes. He talked about famine in diverse places. He talked about a lot of different things, natural disasters. The Bible says they appeared in the days of Amos. That's what Amos 1:1, an earthquake. King Saul, 1 Samuel 14:15. If I take you to Israel and I take you to Qumran, which is 100 years before Christ, you're going to see a massive earthquake, the remnant of it that split one of those scriptatoriums that the Essenes were living in. And non-biblical history tells us the earthquake shook ancient China, Italy, Greece, Turkey, Syria, most every country in the world. In 1906, a devastating earthquake hit San Francisco. It toppled almost every single building in the city, killed over 3,000 people. In short, earthquakes have been a part of life since the beginning of human civilization. So if we're always had earthquakes, how can they possibly be a sign of Christ's second coming? Because he said and linked all of those signs to the labor pains of a woman. How many women have ever had a child? Do your labor pains get slower and less frequent? What do they get? Faster, quicker, and more intense. So the signs are not just the signs of the earthquakes or the famine, it's them getting more intense, larger, and then becoming quicker. So all we have to do is go to science and find out the large earthquakes, 8.0 and over the last century or so, and see if they're getting faster and if there's more of them. If they are, Jesus told the truth. If they're not, Jesus is a false prophet. I mean, understand this. I mean, understand it. So listen to it. According to the Advanced National Seismic System, which is not Christian, it's a science system, composite catalog, recent years have seen a marked increase in the number of earthquakes, major earthquakes, with a magnitude of over 8.0. These are shockers. These are earth movers. So the 1900s to 1909, 3 earthquakes, over 8.0. 1910s, 0 earthquakes. 1920, 1 earthquake. 1930, 1 earthquake, over 8.0. That's in the world. 1940, 1 earthquake. 1950, 1 earthquake. Now notice, Israel became a nation in 1948. Jesus says that you will see the generation that sees these signs, that the fig tree blossoms. Now watch. So there's 0, 1 for decades. 1960, 3 major earthquakes. 1970, 2. 1980s, 3. 1990, 7. 2000s, 13. 2010, 10 to 2000 and 2009. 8 earthquakes so far, the 8th earthquake. So the 20th century witnesses 22 earthquakes with a magnitude of 8.0 or greater. That's 2010 and 2020, excuse me. With a magnitude of 8.0 or greater. But already in the 21st century, we have seen 21 such earthquakes. If that pace continues, we'll see 116 earthquakes of 8.0 magnitude or greater by the end of this century, as opposed to 22 at the end of the last century. They're increasing, they're getting more frequent. How many of you know that Jesus is coming? Amen. He is coming. These things are happening, and Jesus said the generation witnessing them will not pass away before he returns. Turn to your neighbor and say, you might be the generation. That's in the news. How many of you are hoping for that? Man, I am. That's in the news. I'm going to ask the ushers if they come. And by the way, what a great crowd tonight. Let's give yourself a hand for being here tonight.